Hey guys, hope everyone's well. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's supported my new single release so far, who's had a listen. It means a lot to me and it means I can keep bringing content to you guys, so thank you very much. So I'm going to do a bit of a writing slash kind of production breakdown of my new single, I'm Not In Love, I'm Only Calling You Again. I know it's a mouthful, but so I'm going to take a bit of a look through the key elements of the production process and a bit of the context behind it. I wrote this song at the end of summer in 2019 and I was kind of going through a bit of a sort of writer's block phase. I wasn't really like sure of what I wanted to come up with, what I wanted to create, and I was kind of struggling a bit there. But then it kind of sort of, this riff idea that I had sort of came out of nowhere when I least expected it. You know, I had sort of no intention of writing a song with like a really simple guitar riff, but I just stuck with it really. I just kept it simple really. I just tried to force myself to kind of create some music. I didn't want to set any kind of limits or boundaries or anything. The lyrical themes definitely came up before this song kind of started to evolve, and I was kind of taking sort of an outside look at this kind of narcissistic kind of love yourself culture really. The idea that we put on this kind of mask of like arrogance and ego to sort of distract ourselves, you know, from the kind of fragility of it all, and you know, the consuming of fashion and, you know, fast fashion, you know, different things like social media. Maybe I've just spent too much time on Twitter. So anyway, I took this really kind of deep negative topic and kind of put it on top of like a, you know, funky kind of upbeat song. But anyway, this is the Pro Tools session. This basically has the stems on it. Some of the stems were done at the recording studio that I worked at, Studio 91, and some of them were done at my home studio here because, you know, I've got all this set up. I did all the vocals here. I did the guitars and some synth parts and programming, etc. So basically going from the top of the song, we've got this kind of riff that I came up with, which sort of introduces the song. So I wasn't really getting along with this riff. I was sort of thinking, oh, it's a bit boring, it's a bit predictable, it's just an arpeggio guitar riff of an F sharp minor something. And then I thought, well, this kind of idea of juxtaposition, let's put like a call and response thing on it. So that's where this came up. So this track here, hilariously called Nickelback, is the double tracked kind of call and response thing. So I've got the question. And then the response. So yeah, simple enough. So then once I added that, I started experimenting with different chord things, and the bass lends itself to quite a bit of the kind of chordal progressions, and then it started to build up from there. And the bass kind of is so important at this point to kind of keep the harmonic kind of foundation of it all. You know, pedaling on the A and then giving it that nice, you know, E at the end. So the whole song really is held up by the drums and the bass. That's kind of the funk influence coming in, you know, the new wave stuff. And I was experimenting for quite a while with the drum beat, actually. Looking at maybe a 4 to the floor, you know, quite a disco feel, you know, it's got the sort of 16th note hi-hat part. But then I tried it, and the thing is, when you record drums, especially kick and snare, if you hit the kick and the snare drum at the same time, it can sort of cancel each other out. And it sort of has the opposite effect of what I wanted to do, which was drive the beat forward. So this drum sound is actually a live drum sound. There are no samples on it. There are no sample replacements. So what we did was we obviously had a dead kind of kit space. You know, we had the baffles up in the Studio 91. I'll see if I can drop in a picture here actually. But we had the kind of the controlled sort of elements of it, and then we started to add in the room mics and add in sort of the ambience of the room, because it's such a beautiful room sound, and we wanted to keep the kind of live elements, but we also wanted to make a really direct kind of dead sound. What I did was I kind of kept the hi-hats as quiet as possible, because then you'd minimize the bleed, and then the kick and the snare can really kind of, you know, really like ring out. So adding the percussion in. Fairly simple. The only thing that's kind of quirky and interesting about this percussion track is we added in cowbell and a wood block. So it's a bit tongue-in-cheek when you use cowbell. You've either got to use it, you know, full on, make it really loud, make it really exposed, or you've got to kind of bury it in the mix. So So that's just emphasising the open hats, really. So the whole song is fairly simple from the beginning. And then what we did was we added a few kind of quirky things to give it that sort of, I guess, three-dimensional, over-the-top kind of sound, which was a guitar sound that's kind of super saturated. It's called the guitar pallet on here. And that wasn't enough, so we added in this kind of synth that's been absolutely pummeled through distortion. When I heard it on the radio actually the first time, it was kind of so over the top and ridiculous, and I thought I just had to laugh at it, really. So keeping it simple. So you kind of get the idea that this song's going to be a bit tongue-in-cheek, a bit ridiculous from the very beginning with that sort of thing. So moving on to the vocals here in the verse. So this vocal part was actually, I wanted to keep it really kind of light and kind of gritty and kind of sort of a bit passive-aggressive.
Hey, how are you? Are you wealthy? You live at home, can you afford me? I see through your fragility.
Obviously, it's got saturation on it. It's got some kind of quirky effects on it that we wanted to, you know, give it that sort of extra kind of edge and give it something different. So that's just a single track mono thing. So we'll move on to the pre.
Constantly consuming just to figure it out while we're sitting alone because you're letting the doubt. And all the foundations that you do without leaves you drunk on the energy that you're craving to shout.
So this was by far the most difficult vocal part to record. You can hear it's so kind of, I'm at the point where I'm kind of close to breaking up vocal wise. I'm shouting as loud as I can into the mic, and the difficult thing actually was getting the phonetics to line up perfectly, because it's quite a fast kind of singing rappy kind of thing, so it's really fast, and the delivery is so, the pronunciation has to be spot on. So
Constantly consuming just to figure it out while we're sitting alone because you're letting the doubt. And all the foundations that you do without leaves you drunk on the energy that you crave to shout.
So at this point, I'm actually leading the rhythm section into the chorus. I'm sort of setting it up for that big chorus thing here. And the most important part in this whole bit is the bass. So moving to the chorus. So some of the demos actually, just before I hit the chorus, I actually put a major chord in. I put in like a da 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 da, and then I thought that would be a bit too much. So at this point, I'm kind of leading into the chorus.
Drunk on the energy that you crave to shout. Harmony love, harmony calling you.
Then you've got this big hook. Obviously, I'm stepping up vocally. This hook line was one of the first things that actually sort of sealed this whole song as something that I wanted to work on.
Harmony love, harmony calling you again.
I was struggling to try and find like a chorus melody that I wanted to have that was strong but not cheesy at the same time. So that kind of came up and I was like, yeah, that's brilliant. Let's keep with that. So this kind of funky guitar thing here, it's very Nile Rodgers inspired, very Prince inspired, kind of that sort of funky, you know, kind of soul-y guitar sound that I, you know, guitar riff kind of that I like. Loads of added notes, loads of inversions and things like that. Now we've got this track here called Foals. So I'm a massive fan of Foals. I'm a big fan of their kind of plinky, kind of really high sort of pitched, super clean kind of guitar sound. And actually looking back, this was kind of a pivotal part in the chorus because we were sort of listening to it and it was at one level and then we started to sort of turn up that track and it just sort of expanded.
Harmony love.
So if we hear it like that and then we add the high-end guitar sound, it just transforms it and adds that extra colour that I needed. It's almost like an indie track. It's almost like an indie kind of guitar sound. So in this chorus, I've got the low octave on the vocal, which I'll turn up.
Harmony love, harmony calling you again.
That was purely a thing by Sam in the studio. Sam produced this from Studio 91. He just added that in. It sounded great, so we kept it. sort of gave it that three-dimensional vocal sound.
I'm not in love. I'm only calling you again.
Very 2000s boy band, but it's great. And then this vocal delay was quite interesting because I originally had a different like lyrical line in this chorus, and then I kept the kind of delay sound in, and because it was printed already, and I thought actually that sounds quite like a question answer thing, juxtaposition again, so I thought I'd just keep it in.
I'm only calling you again. No, not again. No, not again. No, not again.
Also sounds cool, so it's purely just sounds cool, So the bass part's the most important part in this chorus bit, and the riff kind of emphasis has migrated from the guitar and the verses and the pre-chorus all the way up to the chorus. So we're just again changing it. Bit bombastic, bit ridiculous, but then when the guitar sits on it, on that offbeat kind of funky thing, it just adds that push and that funk thing that I was going for, really. Okay, we'll move on to verse 2. So verse 2, basically I did the classic thing of dropping out the guitars, just sticking to the bass and the drums, and yeah.
Give me respect, I demand it. Above your head, that's where I'm at. I see through your fragility.
Okay, so the main bit in this part is the kind of my sort of Queen moment here, which is the crazy amount of BVs. So we've got this lead line here.
I see through your fragility.
So I love that bit. It's just, yeah, it's one of the satisfying moments in the song. What I tend to do on verse 2s is I tend to take what I've already got with the verse and kind of chop bits out. So take out some of the main rhythm parts, the piano parts, the guitar parts, and etc., etc. And then I try and add something, completely different. So for instance, this is like a big vocal part. Sometimes it could be a new percussion part comes in, but this was obviously the vocals. So yeah, so let's have a listen. I also got the low octave in here as well.
Fragility.
Okay, so the other thing that I want to look at is this sound here. So he took my breath sound at the end of all these phrases and turned it into this. So that's obviously tons of delay, pitch shifting, formant shifting, everything you can think of. And then further on in the track, we've got the next pre-chorus, which again is the same kind of delivery with the vocals, rhythm sections, and like melodic parts, harmonic parts are all pretty much the same.
Fabricated living with an image of pals, spending big on celebrity fashion trends on the pals.
It just sounds so bad on its own. But when you put it in together, what you'd have to do when you do harmonies on recordings and stuff like that, you have to do a thing called blending. So some of you know what blending is, obviously, but blending kind of, you take the lead line, you sort of sit your backing vocal harmony lines, sort of, you sit it so it makes a nice sort of wall of texture of vocals, so you're not hearing individual parts, you're just creating a nice sort of layer, like you would a synthesizer, you're creating layers and stuff.
Fabricated living with an image of pals, spending big on celebrity fashion trends on the pals. What's the story of the list of things you do without, whilst getting high on drugs to stop you craving to shout?
So the chorus. So another thing I forgot to talk about is we've got these claps up here if you're interested in these. So the claps are a mixture of this synth device called a clap trap, which mixes white noise and like a clap sample together to create like a bit of a sort of percussive layer. And then we've also got hand claps. So in the studio, there's a funny video online in the behind the scenes that I made, which I've put up in my YouTube channel, of us all in the same room doing claps. It's a bit silly. I'm not. That footage will never be seen, ever. So another layer that I added to this chorus was this sub bass sound. Now I'll just play the original bass. And you can hear there's also a slight low octave kind of pedal on it. That's done on the Axe effect. So we took the sound and put like a kind of sub octave sound on it, because where I'm picking on the bass, it's quite high. So I'm using quite, a high octave for a bass typically. The bass part is all the way up here. So we're going. So if you have that just on its own, it can kind of sound a bit weak. You're missing the sort of subby low frequencies. And the thing that we did to sort of counteract this, especially in the choruses, we took this sub bass sound and we added that in as well. So this sub bass sound, I believe, was the Studio Sub Fatty, the Moog Sub Fatty. So altogether it has that big kind of fuzzy subby sound, which works really well. So we added in the synth sound first. So we added a one knob pulse thing by Waves, which goes, it's like a tremolo basically. It just is like a faux sidechain compressor. Then we added some brass stabs, synth brass stabs. What I wanted on this was I wanted a real brass section. I was going da 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 da, you know. But obviously, with the budget of being an independent artist and I don't play any brass, you have to get very, very good players if you want brass sounds to be as good as they can be, you know. So we sort of chose to go with a more kind of synth-based sound purely for budget. The other thing we added in was a vocoder. So I listened to this track for ages and ages, and I heard the bridge, and I thought it was really missing something. So I thought I'd add kind of a vocoder in.
You said it before, again and again. You said it before, again and again. You said it before, again and again. You said it before, again and again.
So obviously following the same chords. I think there's about 4 different vocoders doing different textural things. So we look at the break, which is literally just a nod back to the main verse part, the intro. Took out the synths, made it a bit lighter. We had a big conversation, a big argument about that in the studio, whether we should take out the synth parts here, but yeah, it works. So we go all the way back to the vocal and just the drums now. So it's just a classic kind of thing you do with the song. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to take that crescendo thing and make it sort of open out again to give it, you know, the next kick for the last chorus.
Constantly consuming just to figure it out while we're sitting alone it because you're letting the doubt and all the foundations that you do without leaves you drunk on the energy that you're craving to shout.
So by the end of it, you can hear I'm opening out. I'm really pushing on that. And then right at the end for the last chorus, I use the false start. I love using the false start when in my songs because I love just taking that sort of predicted drop and beat sort of start and all of a sudden, bang, you know, it's unexpected.
To shout. Harmony love, harmony calling you again.
So here the double tracks are a bit looser, the harmonies are a bit looser, everything's a bit more sort of not as tight and controlled, it's sort of a bit freer. And the other thing we do is add the bridge synthesizers and vocoder in here just to make a big massive layer of noise and music. So then right at the end, I wanted to round it off. I tried just finishing the song on the chorus and it didn't sound as complete as like a body of work. So what I wanted to do was almost take the listener all the way back to the beginning, back to the verse and just the simplified, you know, the riff, the bass, and just remind everyone, you know, where the song's come from. So right back at the end, we're doing literally a mirror image. So we're taking that riff and putting it right at the end. So the song finishes how it starts. So really. The great thing about this song is there wasn't really much overthinking to do with it. It was, you know, it was fairly straightforward. We used a lot of, you know, studio kind of, you know, effects and nuances to kind of bring out the whole vibe of the song. But other than that, it's just simply a drum line, a bass line and a guitar line the whole way through. Unlike the rest of the songs that I've done. So again, all of these songs that I'm doing just come from different places. This one just happened to be a guitar written song, a guitar riff. So thanks guys for checking it out. Let me know what I can do to maybe improve on this. Just give me your feedback. Let me know what you think, if you liked it, if you didn't like it, you know. And thank you so much. New music is coming very soon, so I'll see you later. So cheers. And drink coffee.
Harmony love.